Starting out this countdown at number 10, Tag. The opening scene of Tag is one of the most shockingly horrific moments in Japanese cinema, and is a perfect setup for the absolute carnage and confusion that follows. A young girl called Mitsuko finds herself battling between alternate realities, each with a unique set of horrors she must face. There is little to no explanation as the audience gets thrusted into a never-ending spiral of danger alongside Mitsuko, which makes the movie a heart-racing watch. Despite the endless world of horror seen in Tag, it is the true reality revealed at the very end that is the most terrifying. Now, if this movie name sounds familiar, it might be because the movie trended on TikTok around when it came out with the famously terrifying bus scene. We can unfortunately only show a short clip because it's from a movie, but does that scene not just give you goosebumps? Like, holy, talk about intense. Now at number 9, The Ghost of the Hunchback. Hajime Sato's 1965 Toei movie Hayden Samushi Atoko goes by several names in the West: The Ghost of the Hunchback, House of Terrors, and Satan's Pit. Regardless, they are all the same terrifying movie. The Ghost of the Hunchback is about a hunchbacked caretaker who presides over a forlorn mansion inhabited by the ghost of his previous masters. An unbelieving trio, a doctor, his assistant, and his niece, fail to heed the caretaker's warnings and are slaughtered horribly by the jealous occupants. Now moving on to number 8, The Curse. Fans of the found footage style horror need to look no further than Nori or The Curse. The film opens with an introduction to paranormal investigator Masafumi Kobayashi, who has disappeared during the process of making a documentary titled The Curse. The documentary then begins to play as viewers are left to uncover the secrets he left behind. Seemingly disconnected mysteries that involve strange and creepy events are tied together by the discovery of an old ritual that summons a demon named Kagutaba. Noroi is said to be disturbingly realistic, which makes it all the more terrifying. I found out the movie is free to watch on YouTube, but that's if you dare to watch this horrifying film. But it can also be found with better quality on Shudder. Now at number 7, House. The bizarre horror that is House is a hyperactive fever dream that takes place in the most deranged, creepy, haunted house to ever grace the big screen. Nobuhiko Obayashi's twisted fairy tale tells the story of 7 schoolgirls on a summer trip to an aunt's remote estate. The fantasy-like beginning takes a turn so deformed and uncanny that it's difficult to adequately describe. House is overflown with unbelievable scenes, people say. The scenes that take place in the haunted house are as gruesome, but they are just as exciting to watch. The movie came out in 1977. And nowadays, watching older horror movies don't really seem that scary because of all the CGI and everything we have now, but after seeing a 5-second clip of this movie, you're sure to have goosebumps. This movie is one of the most inventive and colorful horror movies to ever exist and truly must be seen to be believed. Now at number 6, Sadeko vs. Keiko. Yes, the vengeful ghosts of Ring and The Grudge are iconic, but if you've ever wondered which ghost is stronger, well, here's a movie that brings them together for the ultimate face-off and answers just that. We follow Natsumi, a woman who watches Sadeko's cursed videotape and realizes it's only a matter of time before Sadeko kills her. She tries to save herself by pinning Sadeko against Keiko, a malevolent spirit who resides in a haunted house, hoping they would kill each other and end the curse. The film takes the best parts of the two movies' antagonists and blends them together, capturing the dread and hostility perfectly. And funny enough, the movie seems very similar to Ring. Well, based on the trailer, that is, because I haven't seen the movie, but after seeing the spooky trailer, I might just have to give it a watch. It's creepy and fun and totally worth the watch, and the movie can be found on Amazon Prime, YouTube, and Shudder. Halfway at number 5, Uzumaki. Based on the horror mangaka Junji Ito's spine-chilling manga of the same name, this film's concept is just as eccentric as it is creepy. It's about a cursed town whose inhabitants are haunted by ominous spirals that drive the townspeople mad, and sometimes to the point where they take their own life. Our protagonists race to break the curse, but can it really be stopped? The strengths here are the ghastly body horror, the lack of standard backstory, lending to the sense of hopelessness, and the nightmarish, surreal imagery. A man crawls into a washing machine, people turn into snails, and your fingertips have spirals. Even the sky is cursed with spiral-like clouds. This is certainly not a town I'd personally want to live in, and based on the trailer, it looks very freaky and cryptic looking. At number 4, Dark Water. This is a classic that forever remains underrated and one of people's personal favorites. Yoshimi is a single mother in the midst of a divorce. To prove she is able to take care of her daughter, she moves the pair into an old rundown apartment building, where the haunting horrors begin. A dripping leak forms on the ceiling, a black here appears in the tap water, and an extremely creepy child ghost. It's chilling with a touching mother-daughter relationship at its heart, but don't let that fool you because this movie is truly terrifying. And fun fact, this is based on a novel by Koji Suzuki, who is also the author of the Ring novels, and was directed by Hideo Nakata, who also directed the unbelievably famous and scary movie Ring. Some even say it's Japan's saddest horror movie. Here at number 3, Corpse Party. The movie Corpse Party is based on the horror video game series of the same name. There's also an anime and manga too. It's set in a haunted school and is incredibly dark and blood-curdling, which is right up the alley for most big horror fans. It has everything: blood, gore, mystery, and ghosts. A group of high school students perform a charm called Sachiko Ever After to ensure they'll remain friends forever. Instead, they find themselves transported to a haunted elementary school with resentful spirits, and Sachiko herself, who's actually the psychopathic ghost of a little girl in a red dress. There's also an equally freaky sequel called Corpse Party Book of Shadows. Now coming in at number 2, Ring-You. Ring-You is a cult horror film of legendary status. Its prominence as one of the best horror films to come from Japan has not wavered over for more than 2 decades since its release. Ring-You subjects viewers to a deep-seated psychological attack that leaves them with a mysterious and lasting sense of doom. The story itself is deceptively unassuming. Watch a cursed videotape and die a gruesome death 7 days later. It's a masterful way director Hideo Nakata cloaks Ring-You in growing dread that makes it a superior film. The frightening jump cuts become implanted in your mind, and the metallic screeching will ring in your ears for days after watching. Of course, this one is good, but for me, I really like the newer remakes of Ring, but still, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend this one. Now coming in at number 1, The Grudge. It's impossible to talk about Japanese horror movies without mentioning Ju-on, or The Grudge. The movie is disconnecting thanks to its non-linear narrative, but viewers can expect to encounter 2 terrifying, restless spirits ready to torment anyone that enters their home. Everything about the film is sure to inflict sheer terror. The Grudge draws on horrors from both the real and paranormal, since the terrible crimes committed become the cause of the restlessly horrifying supernatural events. The creeping sense of a foreboding that builds throughout the movie lingers well after watching. I chose to put this at number 1 because I'm a big horror fan, but most horror movies don't actually scare me. But this one actually kept me up at night. I swear all I could hear when I tried to fall asleep was that creepy noise.
At our number 10 spot, we have booby traps. This war was infamous for Vietnam's use of guerrilla warfare on the US troops, but this came largely due to the fact that Americans invaded, locked, and loaded. Despite what many believe, the US outgunned and outmanned the communists, so they needed to find other ways to fight them. And their response was these intricate booby traps. These things were devastating, and just by the looks of it, I understand why US troops' morales were dropped completely down the drain after running into these. The jungle terrain was hard enough having to deal with hiding soldiers and underground tunnels, but imagine walking and running into some of these traps. Some include the punji sticks, which were these sharpened bamboo coated in either poison, feces, or even urine, which could cause immediate infection if stabbed. Another one is the cartridge trap. When soldiers stepped on this trap, a nail acting as a firing pin shoots bullets straight up at the victim. We also have the mace, which is a tripwire trap that triggers a 40-pound spiked ball that swings from a tree and gets stuck onto its victims. These were only a small list of the booby traps contained within these dense jungles. I feel like I should make a top 10 on this, but if you guys are interested to see, here are some other traps. Terrifying, right? At number 9 spot, we have Operation Wandering Soul. The sounds coming from the Vietnam War definitely ranks one of the highest in terms of pure horror. With the Viet Cong hiding in the dense jungles, nowhere to be seen, Americans knew that they needed to bring their morale down without the use of firearms. So in the middle of the night, they would commence Operation Wandering Soul. This is a way for Americans to demoralize the Viet Cong by playing eerie sounds and altered voices on speakers. These sounds were supposed to mimic a wandering soul because in Vietnamese culture, if a proper burial is not done, the soul of the deceased will wander the earth as a malevolent spirit. And during the Vietnam War, many soldiers didn't get a proper burial. The most famous of their recordings was named Ghost Tape Number 10, and the best way to explain it is just to play it for you guys. At number 8 spot, we have Agent Orange. With the jungle being an issue for American soldiers, they decided to use a controversial weapon known as Agent Orange. I warn you, this one is pretty cruel. Agent Orange was a herbicide mixture which contained a dangerous chemical known as dioxin. For those who don't know, dioxin is extremely toxic and can cause skin lesions, developmental problems, immune system damage, and can cause cancer. They estimate that around 3 million Vietnamese people had been affected by Agent Orange during the war, with a recorded of up to 150,000 children born with serious birth defects due to this chemical. Other than the lives this chemical took, the worst part about this was that the dioxin could remain in the soils for decades. This has caused Agent Orange to have detrimental effects to this day. After seeing its destructive power, the US decided to ban Agent Orange in 1971. They took it to the Johnston Atoll and destroyed the last one in 1978. At our number 7 spot, we have My Lai massacre. This could possibly be one of America's worst war crimes they have ever committed, so it's pretty dark just for the warning. On March 16, 1968, a platoon of US soldiers brutally massacred a total up to 347 unarmed civilians at My Lai. They were told inside that Viet Cong were in the area, but when they arrived there, they weren't there. Despite no sign of hostility, Lieutenant William Calley gave the orders for them to open fire on the villagers. The victims included men, women, children, and even infants. After they violated and mutilated the villagers, they went on to burn the village along with slaughtering all of their livestock. It was a complete war crime. It wasn't until an army pilot named Hugh Thompson was walking when he noticed bodies and bodies of civilians as he approached the gunfire. But as he approached the gunfire, he noticed that it was his own comrade shooting. In a change of events, Hugh gave them the orders to stop or he would open fire on them. A total of 26 soldiers were charged with criminal offenses, but only William Calley would be convicted and found guilty of taking the lives of 22 villagers. He was given a life sentence. This event will remain a huge stain on the US military for a long time. At a number 6 spot, we have the Ace of Spades. Another example of psychological warfare done by the US was the Ace of Spades. And yes, I'm talking about the playing card. So for background info, the US Airborne Division used to put an Ace of Spades on their helmet for good luck. Fast forward to the Vietnam War and the US soldiers made it a tradition to leave an Ace of Spades on the helmets of deceased Vietnamese soldiers. Soon the card would be associated with death to both the Vietnamese and the Americans. Eventually, as more Viet Cong saw this happening, their morale would go down and the Americans knew this. So Charlie Company asked the US playing card company to supply them with crates filled with the Ace of Spades cards, which were labeled as Bicycle's secret weapon upon arrival. And they used all these cards and they dropped them all over Vietnamese villages and jungles to frighten them. The Americans would continue to use this to taunt them by keeping it on their helmet as an anti-peace sign. This card would be later known as the death card. Right in the hump of our list, we have napalm. The Vietnam War had its fair share of destructive weapons, but nothing comes close to napalm, which would have been the worst weapon used in a war since the atomic bomb. Napalm, in simple terms, is basically liquid fire or a firebomb fuel gel mixture. It would often have a gelling powder composed of naphthalene and palmitate mixed with gasoline to form a sticky combustible substance. Its sticky nature is the reason why it was so devastating when it released. The substance would stick onto its victims all while burning them alive, or at least causing 4th or 5th degree burns. The area napalm can cover up to 2,500 square yards, which would be completely engulfed in fire. The reason for these bombs in the first place was to support ground troops and to demoralize the enemy. Burning alive has got to be one of the worst ways to go, and seeing this fire would literally be seeing hell on earth. It eventually got banned in 1980 by the United Nations and listed as a war crime. Glad to know this one is gone, but the fact we got to see its powers is terrifying for the future. At number 4 spot, we have the AK-47 over the M16. During the war, American troops would abandon their American-owned M16 assault rifles to use the Viet Cong's AK-47 instead. This was a reason because the M16 was just not as reliable as the AK-47. First, the US changed their ammunition sizes without notifying, and it caused a lot of these guns to jam at pretty random times, which you could imagine would be pretty inconvenient in a gunfight. Second, the M16 couldn't be handled in jungle terrain. It would regularly jam when mud seeped into the gun. I mean, let's compare the two. The AK-47 is a 7.62mm gas-operated assault rifle with the capability to shoot up to 600 rounds per minute. It's claimed to be the most powerful due to the fact it doesn't break or even jam or even overheat. I mean, I don't even need to mention the M16, it has nothing compared to the AK-47. At number 3 spot, we have the Cu Chi tunnels. Deep inside the jungles were not only booby traps, but a system of underground tunnels for the Viet Cong to hide and move around unnoticed. These were known as the Cu Chi tunnels. These were a network of underground tunnels stretching more than 124 miles long. Although these tunnels were known internationally from the Vietnam War, Vietnamese did this well before, back in the 1940s during the War for Independence from the French. However, it wasn't until the Vietnam War where the tunnels would be dug for miles, with reports saying that the tunnels travel from the outskirts of Saigon all the way to the Cambodian border. These tunnels were by far anywhere near safe. Not only did you have to worry about the tunnels collapsing due to the poor construction of it, there would be snakes and scorpions and other booby traps inside of these tunnels. It's said that 45,000 Vietnamese men and women passed away defending these tunnels during the war. At number 2 spot, we have the massacre at Hue. Hue was one of the longest and bloodiest bouts during the Vietnam War, lasting a total of 26 days. During that time, up to 6,000 civilians and prisoners of war were abused, tortured, and executed at random. The Viet Cong believed this to be a cleansing of the area to anyone who opposed the rule and those who were invading their country. This battle was part of the Tet Offensive, which is when North Vietnam Vietnam launched a grand-scale assault on every city in South Vietnam. The Viet Congs had a total of 80,000 troops ready before this assault, and despite the Americans knowing about this prior, they were still caught off guard. At a number 1 spot, we have Welcome with Flowers. The earliest Americans participating in the Vietnam War worked for the Office of Strategic Services, which served as the CIA's forerunner. As early as 1954, they were assisting the French and Southern governments of Saigon. Marines made their first official ground landing in Da Nang in 1965, beginning the first formal ground operation. Instead of a D-Day invasion, local women and flowers were welcomed to the troops. This would forever be eerie because of what happened following this event. The Vietnam War was brutal for both sides, and this side of friendliness is so uncharacteristic of the time. Who knows, the Vietnamese girls who put the flowers on the US soldiers could have been the future victims of their firearms, making this one the top of our list. Coming in at number 10, we have The Cursed Poem, or Tamino's Hell. Published by Japanese poet Seijo Yasu, it's said that one of his poems named Tamino's Hell is cursed and could kill or haunt people if read out loud. So just not to die, I'll be playing it safe and I'll just show you the poem rather than reading it. Yeah. In 1974, Japanese filmmaker Terayama Tsuji directed a movie based on Tamino's Hell. He ended up passing away in 1983. This is where people first believed the movie was cursed, since the poem was used and read in the movie. As time went by, people began forgetting about the incident. But then in 2004, one Japanese writer published a book based on the poem, saying, "If you by chance happen to read this poem out loud, after you will suffer from a terrible fate which cannot be escaped." It said that even hearing someone say the poem out loud could lead your life into disaster or even death. So let's read it out loud. I'm just kidding, everyone relax. Nowadays this poem is feared internationally, but for those who remain skeptical, come on, give it a read. At number 9, we have Hitori Kakarembo, Solo Hide and Seek. The name directly translates to one man hide and seek, and as for the name suggests, it's a game where one person plays hide and seek. The instructions are thorough, so bear with me. Here's what you need to play. A stuffed toy with arms and legs, a red thread and a needle, rice, nail clippers, a box cutter, and a cup of salt water. The process is kind of complicated, so bear with me. To start, make sure you're home alone. Cut open the toy and take out the stuffings, replacing with rice and fingernail clippings. Sew it back with some red thread. Give the toy a name and be sure it's not your own. Then go find yourself a hiding place like a closet and place your saltwater cup in there. After that, go to the bathroom and fill your tub with just enough water to submerge the doll. Now you just have to wait until 3 a.m. When the time hits, go to the bathroom, look at the toy, and say, "You're it." Count to 10 and then go back to the bathroom, pick up the toy, and say, "I found you," 3 times. Easy, right? As you're in the bathroom, stab the toy and put it back in the water. Tell the stuffed animal, "You'll be it." Now it's your turn to hide where you left a glass of salt water. At this point of the game is where things get a bit creepier. People report hearing voices, footsteps, and the TV may turn on and off. Wait a bit until it's complete silence again. Take a sip of the water and hold it in your mouth and bring the cup with you as you look around for the toy. At this point, the toy is no longer in the bathroom, so you need to search the whole house for it. Do not leave the house. Do not turn off the lights and keep everything locked, and be sure to finish the game under 2 hours or the spirit will become too powerful to stop. When you finally find the toy, spit the water out, pour the rest of the cup on the animal, then say, "I won," 3 times. Finally, be sure to burn the toy within 1 to 2 days. I don't know what would compel someone to play hide and seek alone, but there are the instructions. Sealing our number 8 spot, we have Gasha Dokuru. The Gasha Dokuru, or giant starving skeleton, is a rageful, mythical Japanese yokai that is said to be 15 times the size of a normal human, which could be around 90 feet tall. Shaq? This entity is born where there's a large amount of human bodies, whether it be a mass grave or a battlefield. This is where these spirits become angry due to the fact that they can't get proper burials. This usually happens from events such as a war, a famine, or plagues. Then the bones of these angry spirits form together, creating this one large skeleton. Despite their large stature, they still manage to sneak up on humans. They crush them in their hands and bite off their head to drink their blood. This creature will definitely give Attack on Titans a run for their money. The scary thing is, they don't even need to kill people nor drink their blood. They simply just enjoy doing it. They usually roam around midnight using the darkness as their cover. The only way you would know one is near you is from the sounds of bones rattling or strange ringing. Since Japan has less wars and plagues, these creatures have not been spotted. But when it does, I wonder how much gashadokuru will rise. Showing that even our bathroom stalls aren't safe, at number 7 we have Akamanto. Think twice before using certain bathrooms in Japan, as you might run into Akamanto. Akamanto is a spirit in Japan that is said to appear to people in bathroom stalls. Usually the last stall of all stalls. And definitely be sure you have toilet paper in your stall, because that's how Akamanto gets his cue to enter. He is described as wearing a long red cloak with a mask to cover his face. He'll give you a choice between red and blue paper, and your answer will decide your fate. If you choose a red paper, he will cut your throat, causing all of your clothes to turn into a bright crimson color. However, the other option is not any better. If you choose the blue paper, he will strangle you, making your face turn blue. So you basically have zero chance, because if you try to pick another color that he doesn't offer, he will kidnap you and bring you to his lair where it's unknown what he'll do to you. So is there any way to make it out alive? Well, the best way to answer Akamanto is to simply say, I do not need paper, and he will leave you alone. Hey, I know you'll be stuck with no toilet paper, but at least you won't die. At least that's a good trade. The number 6 spot, we have Teke Teke. Teke Teke is a story of a woman named Kashima Raiku who lived in the city of Hokkaido, Japan. One night as she was waiting on the Meishin Expressway, a group of men decided to beat her up and leave her on the floor, barely conscious. With her little strength, Raiku would frantically call out for help, but since it was so late at the night, there was nobody around. After coming to the realization that no one was going to help, she began crawling her way back home. As she was crawling, she noticed that she was on a train track and got struck by an oncoming train. The train ended up severing her body in half. Legend says that she is still crawling with only half of her body, while making the sounds of teke teke. Right in the hump of our list, we have the Kisaragi station. In 2004, a 2chan user named Hasumi posted on a thread asking for help because she got on the wrong train at the Shin Hamamatsu station. This was rather strange because she usually caught the same train after work, and trains in this station only go in one direction. She started getting anxious because she remembered the stops only being a few minutes between each station. But on this train, they were much longer. They even went through a tunnel, but her usual line didn't go through any sort of tunnel. She walked to the front of the car to ask the conductor for help, but the curtain was closed and no one answered. She then knocked on the door, but that's when the train suddenly stopped at Kisaragi station. As she left the train, she was filled with anxiety and fear. But as she tried to go back, the train's door shut on her. She told the other users on the discussion board of the station, but they had all said that there was no such station located in Japan. She decided to exit the station and walk back along the tracks, even back through the tunnel she had gone under before. She reported hearing strange sounds like drums in the distance and a voice telling her that walking on the tracks is dangerous. As she grew more afraid, she turned back to see an old man with one leg, which then slowly disappeared right after. When she finally got out of the tunnel, a man came up offering for help and to drive her to the nearest station. This is when she posted on the thread for the last time, saying that the man was muttering to himself, then her phone died. She was never heard on the thread again. Chilling at our number 4 spot, we have Peko-chan. Peko-chan is the mascot of the Milky Candies, but her story is more sour than sweet. The story goes that Peko-chan was actually based on a young girl who passed away during the 1940s. The legend goes that during World War II, there was a huge food shortage in Japan. Because of this, many people, including women and children, were starving to death. So Peko-chan's mother decided to cut a piece of her own arm off and offered it to Peko to eat. This is the moment Peko-chan discovered how tasty human flesh was. In fact, she had never tasted anything so good in her life. She couldn't resist with such a piece, so she decided to kill her mom and eat her whole body. Ever since, she's been constantly craving human meat, living the rest of her days as a cannibal. At our number 3 spot, we have the Kone Kone. The legend arose in Japan where sightings of a creature are reported in rice fields or in an open sea. This creature resembles a tall white mannequin made of fabric, almost like an inflatable tube, but deadlier. Other than that, no one knows exactly what it looks like because everyone who saw it either went crazy or has died. There's a story where one summer, 2 brothers went to visit their grandparents in the countryside. They were playing outside when they noticed a figure in the distance, wiggling in the wind. But when the wind stopped, the figure kept on wiggling. Curious, the older brother took binoculars to see the figure, but as he did, he stopped breathing and turned blue with sweat running down his whole body. The younger brother asked what he saw, and the older brother responded that it's better not to know. but the voice that came out was not the brother's. Later that day, the older brother was found laughing uncontrollably, wiggling in the fields. All the way at our number 2 spot, we have Honeona. In Japanese mythology, the Honeona, or the Bone Woman, is a spirit whose face, hands, and neck appear to be that of a young, attractive female. However, the rest of her body bears no flesh at all. It's said that she uses her beauty to seduce unsuspecting men, where she would lure them into the dark and isolated areas. Because when they're alone, she reveals her true form and sucks her life force energy, leaving them as a pile of dust. In other accounts, the Honeona are said to be the spirits of a young woman who had died, but cannot move on from their past lovers. To their loved ones, they appear normal, but for everyone else, they appear as the Bone Woman. Taking our number 1 spot in our list, we have the Okiku doll. Let me start this off by saying that this haunted doll is worse than Chucky. This story starts in 1918 Japan. Older brother Aikaichi Suzuki bought a doll for his 2-year-old sister Okiku. The doll had a black bob cut and a traditional kimono. His sister loved the doll so much that she even named it after her own name. These two would become attached together like no other. But in the following year, Okiku became gravely ill and ended up passing away. To commemorate her, her family put up her favorite doll on her memorial shrine. Everything seemed fine until after a few days, they would begin to notice something very strange. The doll's hair seemed to be actively growing, and every time it was cut, it would keep on growing until it reached just above the knees, which happened to be the same place where Okiku's hair stopped. At a number 10 spot, we have Janet's ghost. According to legend, Janet worked as a young Chinese nurse in Kuching's public hospital. According to the story, she vanished sometime in the late 1960s. This occurred when kidnappings in the city were on the rise. The only things that anyone had determined was that the kidnappings might have been related to the building of Saetok Bridge. The territorial spirits would be annoyed if the bridge's constructions were delayed. To appease them, human sacrifices had to be made. Apparently, they preferred to sacrifice virgin girls, but only to use their heads. This meant they would be decapitated and their heads would be embedded in the concrete pillars to strengthen the bridge. Eventually, they found Janet's headless body, confirming the police's theory. Her grieving parents went on to bury her in a red dress and red shoes. So many people believe that if a woman passes away wearing all red, then she will return as a vengeful spirit.
Now at number 9, Pontianak. The word Pontianak is a combination of 3 words: Pana, lady, Mati, dead, and Anak, child. Pontianak takes after a lady who lost her baby during childbirth. She is often dressed in white and has long black hair, and is known to seek revenge against men. Many have said they have encountered this bitter being while on the road in the dark hours. When the Pontianak is near, dogs howl and you can hear a baby crying, and you smell the scent of jasmine flowers out of nowhere. That's how you'd know this vengeful creature is in the area. During the day, the Pontianak hides in banana trees, and she starts her hunt when there's a full moon.
At a number 8 spot, we have the Krak Highway. This Malaysian highway is said to be the world's most haunted highway. It is a 70-kilometer long interstate highway that connects Kuala Lumpur to Genting Highlands. The amount of paranormal reports from this highway alone is enough to make someone take a longer detour instead. The first of these incidents happened when a couple and their baby were returning one night from vacation. The car suddenly breaks down on the side of the road, and as he looks for someone to help, he notices the highway is completely empty. So he walks to find the closest nearby phone booth to call for help, but the man never ended up returning. After a few hours of waiting, his wife calls the police, but when they arrive, they tell her to step out of the vehicle and not look behind them. After walking a distance away, she turns around to see her husband's headless body being devoured by a banshee-like creature on the top of their car. As well, on Krak Highway, if you find yourself stuck behind a yellow Volkswagen Beetle, get away from it. This vehicle is known to stalk drivers and cause them to get into fatal accidents, so drive extra safe when you're in Malaysia.
Now at number 7, Reddit story. The story is posted by someone on Reddit who lives in Malaysia. I saw a ghost when I was like 9 or 10 years old. It was early in the morning, about 6:30 a.m., and I was having breakfast alone in the kitchen when this rotten face, twice as big as a normal head, reared from a corner that led to the back door. One of its eyes was hanging out of its socket. There were holes in its cheeks, stuff oozing out, worms, etc. I was stunned for a good 5 seconds staring at it, and then I snapped and ran upstairs and got my dad. My dad came down, and of course that thing was gone, and my dad showed me the back door was locked. We moved out from the house about 5 years after that, and only then everyone shared their story. My mom said a neighbor saw a hairy leg as big as a coconut tree trunk behind the house. My brother said his friends saw some people dancing in the vicinity while carrying a coffin.
At a number 6 spot, we have the Orang Minyak. The Orang Minyak, or the oily man, is a creature that takes the shape of a man that is covered in a thick, murky black oil. It comes comes out at the darkest time of night and when it's almost impossible to see it. It snatches young women in rural villages when they're sleeping, and this is why many fear oil spills in the country, oddly enough. It can shapeshift into oil to slip through cracks in the walls and the floor, so basically there's no place to hide from the orang minyak. In Malaysia's past, a young women were told to wear clothing that was worn by a man so that this creature couldn't catch their scent. Keeping a mirror nearby is a must because this creature does not like its own reflection. This became such a big urban legend that some girls would cover their rooms in complete mirrors, but in my opinion, that is just as creepy as this creature.
Halfway number 5, Villa Nabila. Some people will be able to connect this location with the 2015 Malaysian horror film by the same name. As the legend goes, a house help, in a fit of intense jealousy, killed all the family members residing in this villa. She buried their bodies all over the premises, but surprisingly, even the investigators could not locate the remains. The spot came into focus once again in 2013 when 23 teenagers were reported to have gone missing at Villa Nabila.
At a number 4 spot, we have Pulau Jerijak. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that. Pulau Jerijak is a small island located alongside Perang Island, and if the shark-filled waters wasn't enough for you to avoid this place, then maybe the ghosts of former prisoners may. This island mainly served as a place to keep the sick, the poor, and the bad. For example, people suffering from leprosy and tuberculosis were thrown onto this island to isolate themselves from others. Reports claim that over 1 million people were crammed on this island to quarantine, and over 5,000 people passed away. Then in 1969, the island transformed into a prison, except this prison would contain those arrested under the emergency ordinance, which is basically people detained without trial. So you already know this gets bad. This prison was very inhumane. Prisoners would be tortured often and left malnourished, which would later claim for their lives. Now it's said that the island contains the spirits of those left to pass away there. And since Malaysia is attempting to make this a tourist spot, many people claim to hear the screams of those tortured on this island, or others fall into a great sickness after coming from the island.
Now at number 3, Pudu Jail. Jails have a history of unfulfilled wishes of freedom, much like the spirits that cannot transcend to the afterlife. Constructed during the British regime, the Pudu Jail confined over 2,000 prisoners of war during the Second World War. Visitors have experienced unnaturally hot and cold spots in various spots of the prison. The execution chamber often bursts into screams, even though it was apparently empty. Despite the fact that it was demolished in 2009 and a commercial development took its place, strange activities are still reported occasionally.
All the way at our number 2 spot, we have the First World Hotel. Oddly enough, this obviously isn't the first hotel in the world, but the largest one in the world, regardless of the name. It is located in the Genting Highlands in the Titiwangsa Mountains. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that again. This 7,351 room hotel is specifically a casino resort, and over the past 20 years of its existence, it claimed the lives of enough people for anyone to avoid this place altogether. Since many people who go there are gamblers, a lot of the people who passed away there are those who took their own lives due to the issues associated with gambling. Odd thing is that people report that the most paranormal activity lies on floor 21, except when you try to visit the floor, you'll notice there's no button for it on the elevator. Guests now report everything you would hear from a gambler who lost big. They hear crying, wailing, and loud footsteps when no one is around them. Reports of poltergeists occur in the rooms and corridors at night, and in some cases, some rooms are shut down because many guests would fall ill in one or after staying in the room.
Now coming in at our number 1 spot, Pokong. In a traditional Malay funeral, a body is wrapped in a white cloth before it is prayed over and laid to rest. According to the Muslim funeral practice, a body has to be tied at several places to keep the cloth in place. When the wrapped body is laid into the grave, the knot keeping the coffin cloth in place is usually removed. Malays believe that after death, the soul of this body will stay on earth for 40 days. Pokong is a mummy-like appearance and is said to be a deceased body covered in burial dirt. If the knot is not removed and stays on beyond 40 days, the body could turn into a ghost and literally jump out of its grave. Only when this knot is taken away will the ghost stop haunting people. People believe that this type of ghost tends to disturb or meet those who have weak spirits. It is common knowledge among Asians that this ghost can move as fast as the jumping vampire. Its leap ranges from 50 meters per jump to over 100 meters. This energetic spirit is believed to be able to roll around and move as fast as a speeding car, and is usually found in villages wandering around.